Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Joey, and Dana White made some comments today at the UFC 261 press conference about who would be potentially in line for a title shot after Saturday's main event between Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal. And he said that Colby Covington will be getting the next shot. And I found this kind of strange because Colby's kind of been turning down fights. Dana cited that Colby's one of the best in the world and that his fight with Kamaru Usman was one of the greatest fights that he's ever seen, which it was a phenomenal fight. I'm not denying. I'm dying to see the rematch personally. But when you look back just a month ago, you have Dana White saying Leon Edwards 100% getting the next title shot with the win over Bilal Muhammad. And I know Leon Edwards didn't technically win that fight. It was a no contest from the eye poke, but he looked impressive early in the first round for that fight. And I know anything can happen. But anyway, then after that fight, they booked Leon Edwards with Nate Diaz. Come on now. Nate Diaz shouldn't be a path to the title. I mean, I know Jorge Masvidal beat Nate Diaz and gets 2 title shots off of it, but by no means should Leon Edwards be matched up with Nate Diaz. I mean, the fight is fun. Don't get me wrong. I'm excited for the fight. But there should be a more clear-cut number one contender fight. I know you have Gilbert Burns versus Wonderboy Thompson at UFC 264, which is kind of there, but still, I personally think if I was running the UFC, what I would do is Leon Edwards beats Nate Diaz, assuming that he does. Then I would book Colby versus Leon Edwards over the summer, and the winner of that fight would then potentially fight Kamaru Usman in winter time, end of year. Because Kamaru Usman has took these 2 fights back to back. He fought Gilbert Burns in February, which had a phenomenal performance in February. Then he will be fighting Jorge Masvidal, obviously this Saturday. And if he wins, he's going to want some time off. And then again, if Jorge Masvidal somehow pulls off the upset, we're going to be seeing a trilogy without a doubt. There's no way they don't book that trilogy after that. But who knows? Crazier things have happened. But Dana White's, I find it weird, to reward a guy like Colby, and I'm not saying, he's 100%, I'm not saying he's ducking fights by any means, but there's been negotiating fallouts constantly. I mean, UFC, when Khamzat Chimaev fell out against the Leon Edwards fight in March, a month beforehand, they said they really wanted Colby Covington to step in for a number one contender fight, and Colby turned it down. He said, nah, I'm waiting for a title shot. And since Colby's loss to Kamaru Usman, even though it was a very close fight, super competitive, super fun fight, one of the best fights ever, he's only won 1 fight, and that was against Tyron Woodley. And at this point, Tyron Woodley's the punching bag for the entire welterweight division. I think he's on a 4-fight losing streak. He just lost to Vicente Luque. Before that, I think he lost to Colby, then Gilbert Burns, and then Usman before that. I mean, all quality names, but we know where Tyron Woodley stands at this point in his career. So for Colby to get a title shot just off the 1 win, and I think this really, stems another problem with the UFC's welterweight division. Of all the guys in the top 10, it seems like nobody's fighting each other. More specifically, let me get to the top 5. Obviously excluding Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington has not fought Gilbert Burns. He has not fought Leon Edwards. He's not fought Jorge Masvidal. And he's not fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. That's the entire top 5. Has not fought any of them. Gilbert Burns has not fought Leon Edwards. Has not fought Jorge Masvidal. And has not fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Then you go to Leon Edwards. Has not fought any of those guys either. Then you go to Jorge Masvidal. Has not fought any of those guys either, other than Wonderboy Thompson. But that was so many years ago. It was like 6 years ago. That doesn't even matter at this point. It's irrelevant. And then you got Wonderboy, same thing. Only fought Jorge Masvidal, and that was like 6 years ago. So it's literally irrelevant. So at this point, why is nobody in the top 5 at welterweight fighting each other? It's ridiculous. You have so many great contenders, and nobody wants to fight each other. I was so thankful, finally, when the UFC announced Gilbert Burns versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson at UFC 264 July. It's one of the fights that's going to be on the Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier trilogy fight card. So I'm super excited for that. That's finally getting hashed out. But rather than make that Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz fight, the UFC should have made the Colby Covington fight. And I know that's easier said than done. They've been having negotiating issues. But for Colby not to take that fight, Leon Edwards wanted that fight badly, for them to kind of reward him. And then also, I'm not even sure the UFC's rewarding him. If I was Colby Covington, I wouldn't be counting on that title shot too much. I mean, he just said a month ago, Leon Edwards 100% getting a title shot. And I know, again, Leon Edwards didn't win, so it kind of throws things, for a wrench into things. But it was an impressive performance, and it ended in no contest with an eye poke. They could have easily booked that fight, Even before that, he was talking about Colby Covington, and he said, we're going to get him a fight here shortly. Never did. So I guess that one win over Tyron Woodley gets him the title shot. I mean, I'm okay with the argument. You just want to give him the title shot just because of the first fight between the two guys was so amazing. But to say, okay, well, he went out there and beat Tyron Woodley, now he deserves a title shot. I don't think that's the right thing to do at this point, especially after, Woodley was destroyed by, Kamaru and then Gilbert and then Colby destroys him. I don't know. And, for me, in a perfect world, they would have done potentially Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards. If Leon Edwards fought and got a win in March, then they would have done Jorge Masvidal versus Colby Covington, and then the winner of that also would have fought for a belt later this year. There's so many matchups I feel like that were missed out on in the welterweight division. I know a lot of people, style-wise, storyline-wise, would have loved Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. There was talk of them being the coaches on The Ultimate Fighter. But for one reason or another, whether it's Jorge Masvidal's fault or whether it's Colby Covington's fault, that fight never came to fruition. And while I lean to think that it was probably Masvidal's fault, look at Colby's style and then look at what Masvidal's weaknesses are. I understand it. But also, Masvidal's going out there to take on Kamaru Usman, so who's basically an equal version of Colby with a little bit better striking, in my opinion. But, who knows what's going to happen in the welterweight division. Dana says these types of things all the time, but I just found it kind of strange. It seems like every other week, if you watch MMA with any type of regularity, watch the press conferences, watch the post fights, watch any Dana White interviews, he's constantly declaring, this guy's the number one contender, this guy's fighting for the title next. And a lot of the times it falls out. So if I was Colby, I wouldn't even be counting on it too much. You never know what's liable to happen. And if Jorge Masvidal somehow pulls off the upset on Saturday night, which would be incredible, absolutely insane, then you can bet 100% bet any amount of money there will be a trilogy. It will be Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal 3, which is a fight that I never thought we would see. But also, and I said this in my pre-fight for the Usman versus Masvidal fight, the reason the UFC booked this, there's multiple reasons, but one of the main reasons was this is going to be the first fight card back with a live crowd in Florida, and the UFC needed to sell tickets for this event. And since they need to sell tickets for this event, they wanted to come up with the biggest possible card, and that's what they ended up with. Jorge Masvidal, very popular in Florida, very popular fighter ever since the Ben Askren KO. And they thought that fight would sell against Kamaru Usman, so they decided to do it. Then they also stacked it, obviously, with the other two women's championship fights, Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas and Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Andrade. And also, just the entire main card is incredible. I cannot wait for Saturday, by the way. But also, they kind of owed Masvidal a little bit because he did step up on 6 days' notice, and he flew all the way to Abu Dhabi to fight. Supposedly had trouble with his weight cut. So I think we've seen in the past the UFC tries to repay guys that do stuff like that. Frankie Edgar took a short notice fight with, I think it was Brian Ortega, and he got KO'd. Or it was Korean Zombie, I think. I can't remember at this point. One of those two guys, I think it was Korean Zombie, got KO'd. Fight or two later, he was fighting for a belt. And it was not because anyone was clamoring to see Max Holloway versus Frankie Edgar, but it was because Frankie Edgar took that fight on like a couple days' notice, late step in. So they rewarded him for that. And I think that's what they're doing here for Masvidal. It'll also close the book on any excuses Masvidal has for this fight. But you know what's crazy? I could see an event where if Masvidal wins somehow and then maybe Kamaru Usman needs some time off, I wonder if the UFC would go for Jorge versus Colby for the belt, because just the heated storyline of the two teammates, now become enemies, which I'm not even sure is real. I think they might be faking that just for possible cash in and check later in their careers. But to have that storyline, the UFC wanted that desperately for the Ultimate Fighter. And if, things worked out, there's a chance if Jorge Masvidal is the champion after this, we could see him against Colby. But ideal world, again, I would like to see Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz play out. If Leon Edwards beat Nate Diaz, there's no reason he deserves a title shot off that win, unless you want to argue the totality of his win streak that earned him the title shot. But I just don't like this idea of guys getting title shots off of Nate Diaz victories. Nate Diaz barely fights, and I love Nate Diaz. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trashing Nate Diaz, but he's a career lightweight. He's just fighting at welterweight because he doesn't feel like cutting weight. He's an older guy. He's outsized by a lot of these guys at welterweight, and for Masvidal already to get 2 title shots off beating Nate Diaz, that doesn't sit right with me. So if Leon Edwards kind of gets a title shot, if he's makes an impressive performance against Nate Diaz at UFC 262, which isn't that far away, that's only a couple weeks away, 3 weeks from Saturday, I believe. So that fight card is going to be amazing, and I love that fight. It's a fun fight, but just for Leon Edwards to potentially get a title shot off of that, that wouldn't sit right with me. So I think if Leon Edwards can get out against Nate Diaz unscathed, I say they match him up with Colby Covington over the summer. Usman's going to want some time off after taking these two fights back to back, fighting in February and then right in April. 2 months. He didn't even have any time to rest in between back to back training camps. He's going to want some time off. Let him sit out till fall or winter. Let Leon and Colby fight each other. Then we could have the winner of Leon versus Colby fight for the belt. And I know another thing I wanted to mention, and I think the thing that threw the massive wrench into the UFC's plans is, and a lot of people know this, Leon Edwards was booked to fight Khamzat Chimaev 3 separate times. They were supposed to fight in December, then January, and then March. And the reason I think the UFC was so desperate for that fight, because a lot of times they would have moved on. They would have found a late notice replacement and this and that. The reason the UFC held on to that fight for so long is because Leon Edwards is a top-ranked welterweight fighter. And Khamzat Chimaev was the hottest prospect coming up the rankings. And they wanted to get him a legitimate win because he hadn't had a legitimate win yet. And not to say I'm not saying they were giving him a favorable matchup because Leon Edwards by no means is a favorable matchup at all. I was going to pick Leon Edwards to win that fight. But if Khamzat could have pulled off a win against a top-ranked guy like Leon Edwards, 100% without a doubt, Khamzat Chimaev was getting the next title shot. And that's why the UFC so desperately hung on to that fight. But obviously it didn't play out. It got canceled 3 times. It's the new Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khamzat supposedly returning in July and August now, but I think that whole plan for him to become champion that quick or fight for the belt that quick is now tossed to the back burner now. And they kind of got to figure this thing out. But I hope now with the Wonderboy versus Burns fight at UFC 264, we start seeing some of these top guys fight each other. I'd like to see Colby get another win. I don't care who it is against, but I'd like to see him get another win and then get a title shot. Because don't get me wrong, as much as Colby can be annoying, and I know a lot of people don't like him, the Kamaru Usman Colby fight was absolutely incredible. One of the best fights of that year, probably maybe even the best fight of that year. That was in 2019. And the matchup is just so much fun. Both guys are such great wrestlers and grapplers that they kind of cancel each other out, and it was just an absolute slugfest from start to finish, back and forth. Kamaru Usman gets the 5th round stoppage, which was just crazy because if it went into the scorecards, who knows who would have won, It could have went either way. I thought Kamaru Usman was winning, but it was so close. That was just basically a coin flip decision by me. So I'd love to see them run that back. That's a fight that I'm dying to see, but I just really want to see some of these welterweights fight each other, some of these top 5 guys fight each other and let the division kind of play itself out a little bit more before we start, having Dana name number 1 contenders when who knows what might go on in the next couple days. But I just wanted to do a quick video on the state of the welterweight division and Dana White's comments about Colby Covington potentially getting the next welterweight shot. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video. Go check out my prediction videos for UFC 261. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.